It wasn't supposed to be this kind of trip. Mark and Julia, both in their late 40s, married for 18 years, had planned a quiet weekend drive through the autumn-swept hills of Vermont. They needed this. Life had grown repetitive, the same routines, the same screens, the same silences. A remote cabin they found online, deep in the woods, promised a reset. No service, no neighbors, just the two of them, some wine, and the crunch of leaves underfoot. But 30 miles from the cabin, a sudden road closure changed everything. Orange cones blocked the paved road, and detour signs pointed them toward a narrow dirt path, veering off into denser forest. GPS says it cuts through and joins up with the highway again, Mark muttered, squinting at the flickering screen. 15-minute difference. Julia glanced at the path. It looked abandoned, more like a deer trail than a road. It doesn't feel right, she said quietly, but Mark was already turning. The dirt road swallowed the car like a throat. Trees pressed in from all sides, some leaning too far, their skeletal branches clawing the roof. There were no birds, no wind, only the crunching of gravel beneath the tires. It was unnaturally quiet, so quiet that every creak of the car felt deafening. Julia shifted in her seat. This feels wrong, like we shouldn't be here. Mark forced a smile, gripping the wheel tighter. We'll be out of it in no time. But after 20 minutes, the GPS froze. The signal was gone. The road had narrowed to barely a track. Mark slowed. We didn't pass any signs, he said, glancing over his shoulder. Then he stopped. Just up ahead, maybe 20 feet from the road, stood a man. Pale, still, watching them from behind a tree. He didn't move, didn't blink. Julia gasped. "Did you see him?" she whispered. Mark looked again. Nothing there, just trees. Yeah, I think I did." Another mile in, the road simply ended. The trees closed in completely. Moss-covered trunks had grown over what used to be a path. It was as if the forest had swallowed the road whole. Mark stopped the car. No way, it was here on the map. He tried to reverse, but the wheels spun in place. A sickening squelch rose beneath them. "Mud," he muttered. "Thick as hell." He stepped out, boots sinking fast. The car wasn't just stuck, it was being pulled. Julia joined him outside, clutching her coat tighter. The cold felt sharper now, wet, and something about the air. It smelled wrong, too earthy, too sweet. "We need to walk back," she said, trying to stay calm. "Find the fork, call for help if we get signal." Mark nodded. They locked the car and set off, but the trees all looked the same. There were no familiar markers, only endless woods, and the creeping sense that they weren't alone. They walked for an hour. The road never came. The sun dipped behind the treetops, casting long, claw-like shadows. "We didn't turn," Julia said, her voice thin. "We just went straight." Mark said nothing. His eyes darted between the trees. "Something's off with this place," he whispered. Then they heard it. A laugh, high, childlike. It echoed between the trunks. Impossible to locate. Julia stopped cold. "That didn't sound right." Mark grabbed her arm. "We're getting out. Now." They turned to head back, only to find themselves staring at the same clearing they'd just left. "What the hell?" Mark whispered. They retraced their steps. Again and again, the same clearing. Time didn't feel linear here. Space twisted subtly, cruelly. Julia's voice trembled. "Mark, are we trapped?" As darkness thickened, they spotted it, a crooked shack in the distance, partially hidden by heavy vines. It looked ancient, slouched like it was breathing. "We can rest there, just for a bit," Mark said, although his voice betrayed his fear. Julia didn't argue. She wanted out of the open. They approached slowly. The door was ajar. Inside, the air was rancid, thick with the stink of decay. The shack's walls were covered in symbols, some carved deep, others drawn with what looked like dried blood. A pile of animal bones sat in one corner, carefully arranged in a spiral. Julia backed away. "This is wrong. This is really wrong." Then they heard it. Footsteps outside. Heavy, slow. Mark grabbed a rusted pipe from the floor. "Who's there?" he shouted. No reply, just a whisper, low and cruel. "You shouldn't be in the forest after dark." They ran. Branches tore at their faces. Roots snagged their feet. The whispers followed, soft and constant. Sometimes Mark thought he heard his name. Other times it was Julia's voice, whispering things she'd never said. "What is this place?" she cried. "It's not just woods. It's alive." Then came the breathing, not theirs, something else. Deep, slow, and impossibly close. When they stopped to catch their breath, the woods changed. The trees had moved, grown closer together. "We're being herded," Mark realized. "It's leading us somewhere." Julia stared through the trees, her eyes wide. A shadow stood there, human-shaped, but impossibly tall. Its limbs were too long, its head tilted too far. She blinked, and it vanished. They stumbled into a clearing under a pale moon. At its center stood an enormous tree, ancient, gnarled. Its bark was scarred with carvings, hundreds of names. Mark stepped closer, his breath caught. "My name. Julia, yours too." Her knees buckled. "What does it mean?" Mark tried to scratch the names out, but the bark bled. Actual blood. From the roots. Movement. Fingers. White and bony, reaching up from the earth. A hand gripped Mark's ankle. He screamed, kicking, but more hands followed. Julia clawed at the vines wrapping around him. "Hold on," she sobbed. But it was no use. He was pulled into the ground as if the forest was swallowing him whole. Then silence. Julia woke lying in cold mud, alone. The sun was rising. Her clothes were filthy. Her face was scratched. Her hands still gripped empty air. But Mark was gone. No hole in the ground, no blood, no broken branches. Just a perfectly undisturbed forest. When she stumbled forward, there was the road, her car, untouched, as if nothing had happened. She ran to it. The doors opened. It started. Everything was back to how it was, except Mark wasn't there. And when she looked down at her right hand, she saw deep scratches, like fingernails had gouged words into her skin. Only one word was clear: remember. Julia didn't go home. She drove to the cabin, alone. Something pulled her there. She needed to know if it even existed. The driveway appeared just as it had on the listing. A quaint wooden cabin surrounded by trees. But something was wrong. The door stood open. Inside, dust covered everything. Cobwebs, broken glass. It hadn't been used in years. She found an old photo frame on the fireplace mantel. She picked it up and dropped it, gasping. It was her and Mark, in the cabin, smiling. But she had never been there before, had she? That night, Julia lit a fire. She sat on the porch, staring into the trees. The whispers returned, not cruel now, gentle, like lullabies. A breeze moved through the forest, but the trees didn't sway. They watched, always watched. She whispered Mark's name into the dark, and something answered. A single whisper carried on the wind. Still here. Her eyes filled with tears. "What do you want from me?" she asked the woods. No answer, just rustling leaves and the creak of old bark. But she understood now. The forest didn't forget. It never did. And once it marked you, it kept a part of you forever. I wasn't supposed to be out there that late. None of us were. It started as a harmless plan, a weekend retreat in northern Maine with 3 old college friends I hadn't seen in nearly a decade. We were all in our mid-40s now, burdened with middle management jobs, mortgages, and quiet regrets that came with the years. The idea was simple: reconnect, unwind, maybe rediscover some piece of ourselves we'd lost along the way. The cabin we rented was tucked deep into the Whisper Pines forest, aptly named, locals said, because of how the wind moved through the trees, like voices you couldn't quite hear. The nearest town was a 45-minute drive over cracked asphalt, and cell service died as soon as you passed the last gas station. It should have been the perfect escape. It turned out to be the last place I'd ever see my best friend. We stopped at a dingy bar on our way to the cabin. Mike wanted whiskey, Liam wanted anything local, and I just wanted to stretch my legs. That's when the old man approached. Worn flannel, beard like a bird's nest, eyes that didn't seem to focus on anything. He said he'd been a ranger back when the forest still made sense, whatever that meant. "You boys heading up there?" he rasped, pointing toward the pine-covered hills through the crack window. "There's a trail the maps don't show, older one, safer, used to be. You want quiet, real quiet. Take this." He handed us a hand-drawn map on paper, so thin I thought it might crumble. His finger tapped a faint path that cut deeper into the forest than the others. "Don't stay past dark," he added, eyes suddenly sharper. "Not there, not in their woods." We laughed when we left, joked about deliverance and local legends, but we still brought the map. The air in Whisper Pines was cooler, damper. The scent of sap and loam soaked every breath. The trail the old man marked was almost hidden, overgrown but visible if you looked hard enough. We followed it in with a kind of dumb thrill, like we were discovering something secret. The deeper we went, the quieter it got. The birds stopped. Even the wind held back. I mentioned it, but Liam said I was being paranoid. Mike, always the jokester, said maybe the trees were watching us. We all chuckled. Then none of us did. 3 hours in, we found the cabin. It wasn't on any map. It wasn't ours. This one was ancient, the kind of structure nature had tried to erase. Boards warped by decades of rain, symbols carved deep into the wood. Strange, angry symbols that curled and spiked in ways that didn't look accidental. "What the hell is this?" Liam muttered. Mike touched the doorframe. "Feels warm," he said, then frowned. "Like breathing." That's when the first noise came. A sharp crack from inside, like something shifting its weight. We didn't wait to find out what. We agreed to loop back, maybe circle wide around the path and rejoin the main trail. Only when we turned to leave, the trail was gone. Just gone. Where dirt should have been was moss. Where footprints should have remained only undisturbed pine needles. Liam panicked first. We came from that direction. We did. I remember that rock, that tree. It was, damn it, it was here. We started arguing. Flashlights came out, and that's when the real fear began. Batteries, fresh that morning, were dying. Mine flickered like it was gasping for breath. Mike's blinked off completely. I'm not crazy, right? I whispered. This isn't normal. No, Liam said. His voice was small now. This place isn't normal. Then we heard it, breathing, low, labored, wet, not close, not far, all around us. We walked faster, spoke less. Every branch that snapped behind us made us flinch. Every shift of the wind felt deliberate. Mike tried to lighten the mood, said maybe the old man cursed us, but no one laughed. Then, without warning, Mike was gone. 1 minute, he was right behind me. The next, nothing. No scream, no rustle, just absence. Mike, Liam called out. Mike, cut the crap, man. This isn't funny. We fanned out in all directions, but the darkness was thick, oily, clinging to the beams of our lights like fog. Then we heard him. A whisper, so faint I thought I imagined it. Run. We did. God help us. We ran. We stumbled into a clearing. It wasn't natural. A perfect circle, cleared of life. No underbrush, no roots, just bare earth. At the center, a crude wooden figure lay upright in the dirt, arms twisted backward, mouth carved into a silent scream. What is that? Liam whispered. Why is it looking at us? It was. I swear it turned, ever so slightly, to face him. Liam took a step forward and the wind shifted. It spoke, not with words, not really, but I felt it. Something in the air, in the vibrations of the ground. It said, "You weren't supposed to see this." And then the trees moved. Not figuratively, not metaphorically. I mean, the trees literally moved. One bent to the side as if pushed by some invisible hand. Another twisted, creaking in protest. The forest was alive, not as plants, but as something aware. We ran again. I don't know how long. Time melted. Watches stopped working. Liam vomited twice and kept walking. I fell once and scraped my palms bloody on something that felt like bone, though I didn't dare look. At some point, the whispering began. Words, layered on top of each other, in voices that didn't sound human. You don't belong. Wrong time. Wrong place. Give us what we lost. When we'd given up, dropped to the forest floor in utter defeat, that's when we saw the light. Not white, not yellow, a dull green glow, like swamp fire, floating, moving. We followed it. What choice did we have? It darted between trees, never out of reach, but never too close. It knew the way. That's the only explanation. Step by step, it led us out of the madness. Eventually, the trail reappeared, just like that, as if it had been there the whole time. Liam and I didn't speak, not until we reached the gravel road. Then he asked, voice hollow, "Do you think Mike made it out?" I didn't answer. I already knew the truth. Search teams combed the forest for a week. Drones, dogs, volunteers, all found nothing. No body, no clothes, no signs of struggle, just silence. They said we were traumatized, that our memories were unreliable, suggested maybe Mike wandered off and got lost, maybe a bear, maybe an accident. But they didn't hear the voices. They didn't see the trees move. They didn't feel the forest watching. Liam moved to New Mexico, changed his number. I haven't seen him since. Me, I stopped hiking. I haven't left the city in over a year. At night, I still hear it sometimes. The breath, the whisper, and sometimes, just before I fall asleep, I hear Mike's voice, not screaming, whispering. There's a moment when your body knows something is wrong before your brain can catch up. It's a subtle tightness in the chest, a shift in the air, a silence that doesn't belong. That's exactly what I felt when Mike called me, his voice quivering like a frayed wire. "He's gone," he said. "Evan never came back." My first reaction was disbelief. Evan was my brother-in-law, a middle-aged accountant who couldn't pitch a tent to save his life. He had no business being alone in the woods, but there he was, supposedly on a solo retreat in our late father's old cabin, deep in the Washington forest line. Mike and I hadn't spoken much in recent years, not since Dad's funeral. The cabin had remained mostly unused, save for the occasional nostalgic visit. When Evan insisted on borrowing it, Mike hesitated, but Evan insisted. He needed to disconnect from everything: his job, the city, his own creeping burnout. The last photo he'd sent felt like a postcard, him grinning in front of a crackling fire, pine trees swallowing the background. But it wasn't the fire or his smile that got to me. It was what I noticed later, in the shadows behind him, barely visible, a shape, tall, lean, still. I arrived at the cabin 3 days later. The sheriff had already called off the major search. "We've done all we can," he'd said, eyes shadowed and avoidant. "Sometimes people just don't want to be found." But Evan wasn't the type to run. His car was still parked by the cabin. His phone, wallet, even his shoes were inside. What kind of person goes for a walk in the forest barefoot and leaves their phone behind? That first night, I couldn't sleep. The forest was too quiet, not peaceful, hollow. I sat by the cold hearth, staring out the window, expecting something, anything. But the woods gave nothing back. Then, sometime after 2 a.m, I heard it, crunching leaves. Not fast, not panicked, deliberate. I held my breath, heart pounding in my ears. When I peeked through the curtains, nothing was there. Yet the footsteps didn't stop. They circled the cabin, pausing just outside each window. Then silence, not a branch. Not a breeze, just a thick, breathless stillness that pressed against the glass. I went into the woods the next morning. I didn't tell anyone. I told myself it was to look for Evan, but deep down, I needed to know if I imagined the footsteps, or worse, if I hadn't. About 150 feet past the cabin, I found a trail. It wasn't marked or natural. The trees had been stripped of bark in long vertical lines, like claw marks, or worse, like someone had dragged their nails down in agony. That's when I noticed the smell, not rot, not death, but damp earth mixed with something metallic, like rusted iron. The path led to a clearing that made my stomach lurch. Stones, smooth and unnaturally white, were arranged in a perfect circle, maybe 10 feet wide. In the center, a spiral made of sticks, feathers, and something else I didn't recognize. Fur, maybe, or hair. I stepped forward slowly, and then I felt it. The air pressure shifted. like something enormous had just exhaled in my face. A low, vibrating breath. It didn't come from a direction. It came from everywhere. I stumbled back, but my feet caught on a root and I fell. Hard. As I hit the ground, my ears rang with something I couldn't explain. Not a voice, not quite a word. Just a presence. Watching, waiting. I didn't tell the sheriff what I saw. He wouldn't believe me. Hell, I barely believed me. That night, I kept every light on in the cabin. I moved a chair against the front door and sat with a flashlight and a hunting knife, like either would help. At exactly 3:12 a.m., the cabin groaned like something massive had leaned against its walls. Then the knock came, soft, rhythmic. 1, 2, pause. 1, 2. The back door. I held my breath so long I nearly passed out. "Who's there?" I asked, barely above a whisper. Silence. Then, footsteps again, but this time, inside. I jumped up, the knife shaking in my grip, and burst into the kitchen. No one, nothing, but the door to the cellar, one I hadn't opened since arriving, was ajar. A low creak echoed up from below, like the settling of bones. I approached, slowly, calling Evan's name. "It's me," I said. "Please, if you're down there, say something." The light switch didn't work. I stood at the top of the stairs for what felt like hours before forcing myself to descend. There was nothing down there, just cold stone and damp air, but someone had scratched into the wall. "We hear you." I left at dawn. I drove straight to the sheriff's office and demanded answers. He didn't look surprised when I described the circle. Instead, he asked, "Did you see anything moving in the trees?" When I nodded, his face turned ashen. "You need to leave town, tonight, and don't speak of this to anyone else." I pressed him. "What is it? A cult? Some psycho out in the woods?" He didn't answer right away, just reached into his drawer and pulled out a weathered photo, dated 1984. 4 men in ranger uniforms standing in that same clearing. "Only one of them made it out," he said. He couldn't speak after, not a single word. "Why is that symbol there?" I asked. "What does it mean?" The sheriff leaned in, voice barely a whisper. "It marks places where the forest feeds. It lures the lonely, the broken, the curious. You step into that ring and it knows your name." I asked him if there was a way to break it, to undo whatever had taken Evan. "Once it marks you," he said, "you're part of it, forever." I returned home, but I didn't sleep. Every creak in the house sent adrenaline surging through me. I thought distance would protect me, but something had followed. I began to find dirt, wet, black soil, on my porch every morning. Birds stopped chirping in my yard. My dog refused to go near the trees behind my house, whimpering at the fence line every night. Then the package came. No sender, just a plain cardboard box. Inside was Evan's watch, stopped at 3:12. Beneath it, a note written in handwriting that was almost his, but slightly wrong. "I'm still here, under the pines." My hands shook as I read it. I could smell the forest as if it had seeped into the paper. That night, I saw him, or what used to be him, standing just beyond the tree line in my backyard, smiling, not waving, just waiting. I moved. I burned the box. I left everything behind. Job, home, the life I knew. I live in a high-rise now, far from any forest. But sometimes I hear the same breathing, coming through the vents at night. Light footsteps in the hallway, though no one's there. And sometimes I find pine needles in my bed. I haven't told anyone. Who would believe me? But I know this much. The forest doesn't let go. Once you've heard it, once it's heard you, it's only a matter of time. You don't have to be in the woods to be part of it. All it needs is silence and darkness, and for you to listen back.